to a Week 13 edition of the quote-unquote expert, quote-unquote roundtable. My name is Adam Levitan. I am the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry. As always, I am joined on my Friday nights by the one and only sharpest hippie in America. It is, of course, JM. JM to win. What's going on, buddy?
Last weekend, my brother-in-law watched this show for the first time, and he assumed you were talking about your son with beautiful beast in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people think that. Why would I call my son a beautiful beast? You know, that doesn't make much sense.
No, but probably a lot of people get pretty confused first time around. Jerry hasn't made as many appearances lately, so.
Yeah. You know where I got beast from, and a lot of people probably don't even know this. It's in, I think, Godfather 2. They get into a dispute in like the apartment building in New York, and he tries to kick the woman out, and De Niro goes in there and he says, she'll get rid of the beast, but she gets to stay. And they refer to the dog as a beast. I don't know, man.
You don't know our producer Jay. That's like he is the Godfather. Those are his movies. So
okay, yeah. I mean,
we got a good thing going here.
Yeah, I hope Jay can confirm that then that they do refer to the dog as the beast in Godfather 2. Yeah, exactly. See? Jay knows what's up. Anyways, we should get to the slate because we have a ton to talk about, because not only is this a 13-game slate, we have had 10-game slates for the last, 4 or 5 weeks or so, it seems like. Now we have a 13-game slate, and we have been inundated with news that has happened after salaries have come out, which is going to push ownership like massively on a few guys, and we'll get to those guys and whether those guys are worth playing at their ownerships in tournaments, because I think it's really an interesting discussion. Like, I think a lot of these guys are pretty clearly good plays, but they are going to be massively owned. What is your initial take on the slate, Jam?
Yeah, 13 games obviously gives us a lot to like. It'll be interesting to pick through the news that's come out, because a lot of plays to like, and is it another week where not a ton just really separated from everything else? So there's a bunch of, before this Kareem Hunt news, there were a bunch of cheap running backs who might get 6 to 8 targets. And then there were, Christian McCaffrey, who rarely gets more than 19 touches, and Gurley, who's going to be in a blowout. So there's some concerns there. Blowout concerns on the Chiefs, just like a lot of things where teams in really good spots might not hit those 30, 35 points you really want from them. And that created a lot of interesting conversations in this mid-range, of where to go and how to build a roster. I think that things become totally different now with Deshaun Jackson out, with Kareem Hunt not playing this week. So yeah, it'll be interesting to talk through things. A lot of news has come through today, and kind of figure out what we like in each range and where we would like to land heading into this weekend.
Let's start at the quarterback position. And the price on Patrick Mahomes brings me back to the days when DraftKings used to price quarterbacks at a wider range, when the good ones used to be around 8K and the bad ones were around 5K. And now Mahomes is 7,600. You can get Matt Ryan, you can get Kirk Cousins in the mid 5Ks, et cetera, et cetera. But Patrick Mahomes, this matchup is just as good as it gets. I tweeted today about how he's been the most affected by pressure, negatively affected by pressure in the entire league. I mean, Oakland is on a historic pace in terms of lack of pressure on the quarterback. I think the only ding you could put on Mahomes is that the game is very likely to blow out. That said, I think he has a very good chance of getting 25 to 30 points, even if it's only 3/4 of action. Still, it feels like a little bit of fancy play syndrome to me to go all the way up there in an optimal build. How do you feel about Mahomes?
Yeah, and what was interesting is now we've got some salary opening up, right? So you could get to Mahomes pretty easily. The Raiders are allowing 27.9 pass attempts per game, which is absurd. I mean, that's unheard of in today's NFL. But I laid out the numbers in the NFL Edge subscribers. You can find all those in the Chiefs Raiders write-up. Mahomes, I think it's like 5 or 6 games of 33, 34 or fewer pass attempts. And the only game with fewer than 3 touchdowns was against the Cardinals, which is a tougher pass defense. So he does have a lot of games with 28 to 33 pass attempts and 3 to 6 touchdowns. So I'm fine with it. I think it's I don't think you're going to be disappointed with Mahomes this week, and I think that's kind of the case with Mahomes and the top of the price range at running back. And so the question is just, does the salary go farther somewhere else? Like it's unlikely that we get 35 to 40 points from Mahomes because the Raiders just literally can't do anything. In fact, the Raiders, and I think it's important to note, the way that the Chiefs are attackable is they allow a deeper than average ADOT. So teams are able to attack them downfield. The Chiefs allow a low catch rate. So the big thing is downfield passes, and when they connect, big plays pile up. Well, Derek Carr's average depth of target is 6.3 yards, which is the lowest in the league. So the Raiders just match up so poorly with the Chiefs as far as the advantages that the Chiefs defense gives and what the Raiders can do. So I don't expect much from the Raiders, and I think that's a big concern. But what do you think? We get 3 quarters out of Mahomes, right? They don't just take the ball halfway through the third quarter.
I think people tend to overrate blowouts a lot. I mean, if it gets to a point where Mahomes is really going to take his foot off the gas, they will have 30 points already on the scoreboard. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to take their foot off the gas before that, and that leaves a lot of room for touchdowns, 4 or 5 touchdowns most likely. So yeah, I'm fine with Mahomes. I think he's an awesome GPP play. I think it might be a little bit fancy for cash and unnecessary, but I don't know for sure. One of the reasons I think that maybe you don't need to go to Mahomes is because we do have some strength in the 6K range. Particularly, I think with Cam Newton at 6,600, who gets this unbelievable matchup against the Bucs, and I think it also helps that we have seen the Panthers kind of use and get all their weaponry healthy, like Curtis Samuel and Devin Funchess is back. Not that I don't even know if that helps them or not, but they've unlocked DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, obviously Greg Olsen is healthy. Like they have a lot of really good pieces, and the Bucs continue to just lose guys in the secondary. It's just such a disaster. So I think Cam is in play. I think Winston is in play. I think Goff is in play in the 6K range. Do you have a favorite of those 6K range quarterbacks?
I don't have a favorite yet. I've been going to that Tampa quarterback spot when it's been a toss-up this season, and it's been a little bit lower yardage with Jameis, but Jameis has been adding about 30 rushing yards per game. We know he's not a rushing quarterback per se, but just with all of these vertical routes, if things are covered, there's a lot of open space underneath. And I think we can bank on about, basically we've been able to bank on 250 passing yards and 40 to 60 rushing yards from Cam, and we've been able to bank on 300 passing yards and 30 rushing yards from Jameis. So I think it's pretty close between the two. I think Cam has a higher ceiling just because his chances of running for 2 touchdowns or busting off like a 60-yard rush are a little bit better. I think it's close between them. Goff would probably be third in that group for me, but I'd be totally fine rearranging that anyway. And again, it's the same thing. It's blowout concerns, but what we've talked about throughout the season, a blowout, like, all right, on the Chiefs, a blowout, we know that means Mahomes is getting those touchdowns. On the Rams, a blowout could mean that Gurley's gotten 2 or 3 touchdowns on the ground. We've seen games where the Rams put up 37 points and Goff got 1 or 2 touchdown passes. So a little bit lower on Goff, but I like all 3 quite a bit. And those are the guys in that price range that I really like. And I think it's worth noting I like all 3 more than Lamar Jackson. Mm-hmm. This fantasy hype on Lamar Jackson has gotten a little out of hand. I mean, when he's not running these zone reads, he's just a below average NFL quarterback right now. Not to say that his arm talent isn't awesome, not to say he won't be great in the future, but he's not reading the defense the way you need to. What has he gotten? Back-to-back games of sub 200 passing yards against 2 of the worst defenses in football. Mm-hmm. Another similar matchup, but I certainly like these other 3 more than Lamar. Are you fine with that take?
Oh yeah, I'm not considering Lamar really this week. I mean, his first 2 games came at home in these really good matchups where Baltimore could just absolutely dominate with their defense. Lamar didn't have to do much. The game was under control for him. Now going down to Atlanta, I think that the Falcons will find ways to move the ball, and I think the Falcons could get a lead here. And at that point, it starts to get dangerous for Lamar. They force him into throwing situations. So for sure, for me, the 6K guys over Lamar. One other guy in the 6K, or maybe 1 or 2 other guys in the 6K range I want to mention. I do expect a very run-heavy approach from the Seattle Seahawks, but we can't ignore the efficiency that Russ Wilson continues to have. Do you have any thoughts on him at 6,300? And also, I mean, Deshaun Watson hasn't had more than 25 pass attempts in any of the last 6 weeks, which is just absolutely insane. But Deshaun Watson's legs are always going to leave some upside. Do you have any thoughts on Russ and Deshaun Watson at the lower 6K range?
I'll start with Deshaun just because I think that obviously his upside is tremendous. He had what was it last week, 70 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and then he had a game in this stretch of 25 or fewer pass attempts with 5 passing touchdowns. Wouldn't go anywhere close to him in cash games just because we've seen how low his floor can be, but certainly he could outscore these other guys. Russ would be a little bit tougher for me. I mean, I don't expect a ton from San Francisco, and we have 2 of the run heaviest teams in the NFL. A San Francisco team that obviously prefers to run, and then a Seattle defense that's much easier to attack on the ground. And so again, not that I expect a bad game from him, but I don't see him outscoring all of these other guys. So Russ is not on my radar. Deshaun Watson, I'd be more fine with that one just because, variant game flows. There's different things that could happen where he could actually pop off or be forced to throw a little bit more. But yeah, and you know what? I'm actually curious for your take on this Cam, Jameis Goff thing too, because we kind of ran through mine, but didn't really get to yours on those guys.
Yeah, Cam would be number one for me for sure, and I think he has the best matchup. I know he's on the road, but he for sure has the best matchup. And I think one thing Greg Cosell noted on their podcast this week, and he's like, the ultimate film watcher guy. He says since Tampa has changed their defensive coordinator, they have played more man, and obviously when you play man against Cam Newton, I mean, you're asking to get a lot of rushing yards out of Cam. So yeah, it would be Cam first for me, then Winston, and then Goff probably as well. But yeah, I think either one is fine. I mean, the 300-yard bonus is just like so likely for Jameis. And I know you said he's been throwing for less than Ryan Fitz has, but still, I mean, I think out of almost anybody, like I would want Jameis most likely odds to hit the 300-yard bonus. So yeah, that would be my take on that. In the 5K range, there is Kirk Cousins at 5,500 against the Patriots. There is Matt Ryan at 5,600, but he has to face the Ravens. Any interest down there in the 5K range, or do you think that going below Jameis Winston at 6K flat is silly?
I don't think it's silly. I think you could, before pricing opened up so much, I was definitely considering Cousins just because we've seen it. You're going to have to pass against the Patriots one way or another. Some dents in that theory is that Tom Brady hasn't looked the same this year. Obviously, the Minnesota pass defense has been tremendous this year since getting flamed by the Rams earlier in the year. And then Jason McCourty, well, let's say that the Patriots don't just play slot duties and they put Jason McCourty on Adam Thielen, which is totally in their wheelhouse to do. It is difficult matchups across the board for these receivers with Diggs on Stephon Gilmore and McCourty on Thielen. So I don't think I'll go there with pricing opening up the way it has, but I think you can definitely make a case for Cousins. And then Matt Ryan, I want to hear your thoughts on this because obviously in cash games and even small field tournaments doesn't make sense. But if there's a quarterback who could get 30-plus points, it would be Matt Ryan at home, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me on both Matt Ryan and Julio is, yeah, it's an awful matchup. I get it. But DraftKings has adjusted the price and ownership will adjust as well. So it's not like DraftKings adjusts the price and then all of a sudden Matt Ryan and Julio are really owned. They adjust the price so we get a discount there and the ownership gets discounted really hard. So yeah, if I was, playing the lotteries and stuff like that, I would for sure have Matt Ryan in there. I mean, given the rules in today's NFL, like regardless of matchup, it's just so hard to stop really talented guys in imperfect environments like Ryan and Julio and all those guys. So yeah, I'd be okay with that. Anything else on that or anything else off the board at quarterback?
No, but that segues pretty nicely into the high end of the running back price range where there's one guy who's been discounted pretty heavily as well.
I assume you're referring to Saquon Barkley at 7,900.
Yeah, which is just a crazy price on him in an extremely difficult matchup. I didn't mean to steal your thunder with the transition, but yeah,
I do the transitions here. God damn it.
We'll work this out afterward. Yeah, 7,900 is just an insane price for a guy who's going to get, a floor of 6 catches for 40 yards and 40 rushing yards, and touchdowns and all that is bonus from there. That price stood out to me the most in the running back position. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you introduce a lower floor than maybe we give it credit for when you face the Bears, but the line movement has been really good towards the Giants. So yeah, I think the Giants have a chance to show up here and play well and win the game. And if they do, Saquon will obviously be massively involved. In terms of rushing the ball, like up the middle runs with Saquon against the Bears just have no shot whatsoever, right? Like they're just drawing stone dead on that. So you were gonna have to do it through the pass game, and you're gonna be looking for touchdowns, I think, too. So I don't know, man. Like given the way pricing's open up, it's with McCaffrey and Gurley up there for more, but not out of control more. I think I would rather go there. I don't know. Are you thinking about because if you play Barkley over McCaffrey and Gurley, I'm telling you right now, you're going to be massively contrarian because everybody's lineups are going to now be with Spencer Ware and some other values we're going to get to, and then pay up for McCaffrey and Gurley.
Yeah, I mean, that transition made it sound like Saquon's my favorite play or something. I just think it's really interesting where he is. Yeah. And this whole floor, this has happened a few times where Saquon and then a couple of games with Russell Wilson last year where I felt that their floor was just super secure. And you've said differently. And I was talking to Draft Cheat about Saquon in week one. I said the same thing against the Jaguars. I just felt Saquon's floor was really secure. And I still feel that way. I just think in these really tough matchups where you've got to get the ball to somebody and they know they can't run up the middle. And most games, Saquon hasn't gotten more than 40, 50 rushing yards. So I do think that his floor is actually like it'd be tough for him to fall shy of 15, 16 points, which does make him really interesting tournament play. Definitely not a better play than Christian McCaffrey and Todd Gurley on paper, but I think he's really interesting to consider in tournaments because if he does score 2 touchdowns, which LeGarrette Blount did against the Bears, if he does score 2 touchdowns, then you're looking at 27, 28 points at pretty low ownership, and you can probably fit Saquon and one of these other guys in together as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about these other high-priced guys. Christian McCaffrey is going to be massively owned considering what he did last week and considering the matchup. I mean, Tampa continues to get flamed by all positions, not just wide receivers, not just running backs anymore. Everybody is flaming the Bucs. I believe Christian McCaffrey had a huge game against them last time they played. I mean, I'm sick. Last week, I think I had the best or one of the best, for cash non-Christian McCaffrey lineups, and I played Connor over McCaffrey because I was trying to leave room for Eckler in case Eckler opened up. And I mean, it just punished me. Like I'm just sick about it because James Conner on the road with the Steelers versus Christian McCaffrey at home with his floor, like he can't fall short of like 12, 15 points because of his pass game role, whereas Connor we know can. So I was just sick about that decision that I made. And everybody else, obviously, who didn't play McCaffrey is sick too. So do you have a preference between him and Todd Gurley? I will say this about Todd Gurley. When we last saw Todd Gurley, he lost a lot of reps, or some reps more than usual, to Malcolm Brown. They've gone back and forth. Was it due to this ankle thing? Maybe, maybe not. But like when you're deciding between these really awesome plays, maybe they're trying to save Todd Gurley a little bit and rotate in Malcolm Brown a little bit more. I really don't know. That said, Todd Gurley remains just an absolutely awesome play. I think people are going to have a bit of difficulty parsing between Christian McCaffrey and Todd Gurley. Do you have a strong take there?
Man, I felt the same way as you last week. It was a really tough week to get, 20 points from every player on your roster. And I put up 160 without McCaffrey and then just got smoked by the time he was scoring the, whatever it was, third touchdown or popping the 100-yard bonuses. So I don't think McCaffrey is point chasey. Obviously we know that when we look at the numbers, but it can feel weird to this guy's price has gone up. Some things that are interesting to note. So he's gone over 19 touches only twice in his last 7 games. He's gone above 80 rushing yards only twice all season. So I think we're just having to, or I'm having to, you less so because you've been really good at this. I'm having to readjust to this year's pricing, because in my mind, 8,800, you don't pay 8,800 for a guy who almost never sees 20 touches. We can talk about the pass game role, but how many times has McCaffrey gone over 6 receptions? I think twice all season. So you're looking at basically the same pass game role as Gurley, 6 catches for 50 yards. And if this guy never gets over 80 rushing yards, it's not like he's just a stone lock for 30 plus points. We've seen it throughout the year. He's had some games at 15, some games at 20, 21, 22. So for me, I don't think that McCaffrey is just a lock for 30 plus points and what we would typically be targeting in this price range. But given the way pricing is now, he's probably still the best play on the slate. There's one wide receiver that I think that we can really make a case for in tournaments. We'll get to that. On the Gurley thing, I think it's interesting to note their last 8 games, I was shocked to see this. Their last 8 games, 6 of them have been one-score games. Then one of them was the 10-point loss to the Saints. And then in their only blowout win in that stretch, Gurley played like 65% of the snaps, and Malcolm Brown closed things out. So I do have some concerns. The Lions' run defense, we're not as concerned about matchup with Gurley, obviously, but worth noting, if we take away that one long run Dalvin Cook had, they've allowed 3.2 yards per carry in their last 5 games since they got Snacks Harrison. So tougher matchup, and Gurley could be rested late. So I think that McCaffrey is a better play. But if Gurley's out there for 85, 90% of the snaps, it could go either way. I mean, are you on board with that right there?
Yeah, and I think the key with Gurley is so like the touchdown expectation is so much higher on Gurley than it is on McCaffrey, even though McCaffrey's just been bombing touchdowns lately. The expectation on Gurley's is way higher. Obviously, trying to bet on touchdowns is always a risky proposition, but Gurley's red zone role remains just ridiculous. Before we get to the cheap guys, I want to talk about a couple guys in the mid-range. The first being Aaron Jones, who is seeing like all of a sudden Mike McCarthy finally pulls his head out of his ass, and now Aaron Jones is getting like 90% market share of running back carries and running back targets. He gets a matchup against Arizona at home. Obviously, Arizona has faced the most rushing attempts in the entire league. Before everything opened up, I thought Aaron Jones is just an absolutely phenomenal play. He remains an absolutely phenomenal play. To me, is Aaron Jones a priority for you, though? There's so much opportunity cost at running back every week. There's like 7 running backs I want to play every week, and you run into so much opportunity cost. So you have to think about, not only is this guy a good play, is it worth the roster spot when you can only have 3 running backs?
Yeah, I think it was actually something I read that Pete Jennings put out like 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe it was Notorious, but one of them said, think about every position in your roster, not just in terms of what you gain, but also what you lose with that roster spot, which is basically what you were just saying. And I think that was a good way to put it. And it's stuck with me since then. Yeah, Aaron Jones probably built 10 or 12 rosters this week while writing the NFL Edge and doing research, and he's been on maybe all but 1 or 2 of them. So I like to play quite a bit. It's a similar thing where adjusting my eye level of what I am targeting in a certain price range, because still, Aaron Jones, no games in his career above 19 carries, only 1 game in his career above 17. Tough to trust Mike McCarthy, who almost seems to be trying to coach himself out of a job right now. But 5 to 6 targets most of these games recently. You pop in 5 to 6 targets and 17 carries against an average run defense, and then you hope that he's getting all the extra carries that the team gives up, as opposed to them putting in Jamal Williams. Yeah, I think Aaron Jones is a really nice play. I think it'll be tough for him to fall shy of 12, 13 points, and obviously multiple touchdowns. He could get, some big plays he could get. So I like Jones quite a bit, and I think that there's a strong case to be made for maybe not starting your roster with him, but making him a priority along with one of these higher priced running backs. I think there's ways to do this to get 1 high priced running back, 1 high priced receiver, and Aaron Jones, and feel pretty good about everything on your roster. I'm not stuff enough to be certain about that, but yeah, I like getting to Jones, and it's really not that far between him and Breida as far as touch expectations, but better offense, home favorite, and basically 1 or 2 additional carries and 1 or 2 additional targets for Aaron Jones. I think it's worth it to spend that extra salary.
Yeah, and I'm worried about the 49ers overall going into Seattle, a highly motivated Seattle team with like Nick Mullins, Dante Pettis, and like, Kendrick Bourne. Like, you could easily just go in there and get whitewashed. You know what I mean? So I have major concerns about rostering 49ers guys. A couple more running backs here. Let's stay in the mid-range. Philip Lindsay is not have the lion's share of the work. I mean, it's like 65-35 versus Royce Freeman. That said, Philip Lindsay's efficiency is just awesome. I mean, the guy's ripping off over 5 yards per carry, plays well in the pass game, gets this really good matchup against the Bengals. Although I will note that one of the Bengals' best defenders, a lot of people may not even know him, Nick Vigil, will be back after a long absence, which I think certainly helps the Bengals defense. How do you feel about Philip Lindsay at 5,400?
Yeah, I mean, Vigil coming back still doesn't make this like a tough matchup.
No.
And we've been on this since like week 3 of just use running backs against the Bengals, just because a lot of big plays. I believe they've given up top 3 or 4 in 20+ rush plays of 20+ yards, rush plays of 40+ yards, 31st in drive success rate allowed. near the bottom of the league in red zone touchdown rate allowed. So you add it all up, and it's just teams drive the whole field and then score at the end with a lot of big plays mixed in. I mean, that's perfect for a back like Lindsay. Totally not my style of play because it's a bet on efficiency play. We're not going to expect more than 14 to 18 touches, but it won't surprise me at all if Philip Lindsay outscores, several of these guys priced higher than him. If he outscores Breida, even if he outscores Aaron Jones, I don't think that's the likeliest expectations. Jones is the better play on paper, but I like Breida quite a bit in tournament. I mean, Lindsay quite a bit in tournaments, and just this dude's so explosive, and we know they're not going to give him as many touches as they should. But I mean, if this guy gets 14 to 18 touches, he can easily rip off 130, 140 total yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns. So, I think Lindsay's off the board for me in smaller field stuff, but a really sharp play in large field tourneys.
All right, let's get to the news. The first news of the week was Leonard Fournette getting suspended for 1 game. Do expect Carlos Hyde to start. I think the question is, will Carlos Hyde be the full-fledged Fournette role and TJ Yeldon barely play, or will they go to more of a 1A, 1B between Carlos Hyde and TJ Yeldon? I think Carlos Hyde's ownership and TJ Yeldon's ownership is just massively dropping in the wake of the Kareem Hunt news, which we'll get to in a second. So with that noted, do you have any interest in the Jaguars guys? Remember, Carlos Hyde is 3,300. It's crazy. Like DraftKings all year had backup running backs at 4,500. They just forgot with Carlos Hyde and left him at 3,300.
I didn't even know that was his price, which is how little I've thought about playing Carlos Hyde. I mean, I think that even if so you can make a case that they want to go run heavy, right? We've seen it with Fournette in there. That's how they wanted to win games this year. They talked about it all offseason, was ride the defense, ride Fournette. And it worked last year. It worked last night for the Cowboys. You can win games in the NFL this way. They haven't been able to do it with Fournette out, and they've switched to a pass-heavy game script week in and week out just because they can't run the ball. I do think that even if they come into this game trying to be ground and pound, the Colts are very difficult to run on, and they're very attackable through the air with running backs. So I would still expect Yeldon to be the guy to play here. But yeah, I mean, Hyde's not crazy. What if he scores 2 touchdowns and goes for 50 yards? I wouldn't consider him a safe play by any means. The interesting thing for me with Yeldon is optimally we're looking at 6 to 9 targets, but we're also looking at probably 5 to 8 targets with Tariq Cohen. Kenyon Drake has 6+ targets in 5 of his last 7 games. Usually sees another 5 to 8 carries in there. Theo Riddick, 6 to 8 targets. I don't think that Yeldon's just a smash play down here. I think there's a lot of guys you could consider over him. With that said, if ownership's going to be low on Yeldon now, I mean, that was my thought before this Spencer Ware news. So if ownership's going to be low on Yeldon as well, it's not like you have to move off of him for one of these other guys. I do think that Drake goes significantly overlooked as a guy who has seen 6+ targets in most games. 20% of Tannehill's throws this year have gone to Kenyon Drake. He has 7 touchdowns on the year. The Bills face the 6th most running back targets in the NFL. So quite a bit to like about Kenyon Drake if you're going to go to one of these pass catching. They're all worse plays than Spencer Ware, though. So
right.
That's tournament stuff, or maybe taking a second cheap running back down here.
Yeah. Well, the only thing on Kenyon Drake that scares me is he is nursing this shoulder injury, has not been taking contact in practice. I think maybe he's a little bit more hurt than they let on. So I think the touch ceiling is lower than a lot of these other guys. But as you said, he's still he's playing this pass game role. He's very likely to get targeted 5, 6, 7 times. Let's get to the Spencer Ware situation. Obviously, we don't need to tell you guys. You guys are too sharp. Spencer Ware is a very, very good play. If I tell you Spencer Ware is going to be 40, 45% owned in tournaments, do you still think Spencer Ware is a very, very good play, JM?
I mean, what are his chances of failing, right? It's the worst run defense in football, or bottom 3 run defense in football, and they face the most rush plays in the league because teams don't have to pass on them. And I mean, unless he gets just the Andy Reid treatment and sees 14 touches or 16 touches, it'd be tough for him to fail. It wouldn't necessarily be tough for one of these other guys down here to outscore him, but it's not the likeliest scenario because you're looking at guys who you're targeting for 5 to 6 catches, as opposed to Spencer Ware, who probably gets 2 or 3 catches and 18 carries. I would have a tough time moving off of Spencer Ware this week, especially in single entry stuff, smaller field stuff. You and I aren't game theory bros to the extent of some others, so tough to say how to play that in something like the Millie Maker. But yeah, I mean, in any of the builds, I'm focused on Ware's pretty close to a stone lock just because it's tough for him to fail in this spot. I mean, can you come up with a scenario in which he fails here?
No, I mean, he is coming off an ACL tear. I will say that, and that was a year ago. He has looked fine. The thing that makes me feel really good about him is Kareem Hunt's come off the field in a lot of passing situations, 2-minute and 4-minute, in favor of Spencer Ware. So, like, we know that the Chiefs like him in the pass game role because they've been using him there ahead of Kareem Hunt already. So, yeah, I think Spencer Ware is obviously really strong and going to be really, really popular. Off the board, one play I like off the board is Chris Carson. As I said, I have major concerns about San Francisco going into Seattle, and I think Seattle could ring up a big number on San Francisco and just really dominate. And Seattle's whole goal is to run. I mean, they're the only team in the league that has more rush attempts than pass attempts. I think Chris Carson is a reasonable bet for 18, 20, 22 carries, depending on how the game goes. I don't think very many people will be on him. And then Nick Chubb, too. It's just a guy who is probably appropriately priced now, but they're using him in just an awesome, awesome way, Nick Chubb, and he's going to get 20 carries, and they're using him more in the pass game as well. So those would be two guys that may be a little bit off the board that I like. Any thoughts on those or anything else off the board?
Yeah, I hadn't thought much about those guys. Chris Carson, obviously, you're looking at likely 0 catches, so not too different from Gus Edwards, but attached to an offense that you feel a little bit better about, less of a good matchup. I think ownership will be super low on Carson. And Chubb, I mean, I don't like attacking this Houston defense, so I won't be on him. But I do love Chubb and love the way they're using him, and he was a core piece for me last week. So not against him as a player. I think in that same game, Lamar Miller is interesting. He's going to be capped at around 18 to 20 carries, but he gets around 2 catches, 20 receiving yards each game, and it's a good matchup. And then we didn't talk about LaShawn McCoy, who is just in this awesome matchup against the Dolphins run defense. We've seen the line move, I think, 3 full points in the Bills' direction already. These teams are pretty evenly matched. And obviously, LaShawn McCoy is playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in football, so that's a concern. But yeah, I mean, from a ceiling perspective, it wouldn't be surprising if LaShawn McCoy has a big game here.
All right. Anything else on running back? Or are you ready to move on?
Let's move on. I wish Kerryon Johnson were healthy this week.
Yeah. Kerryon's a beast. Get well soon, Kerryon. All right. I think the first thing we should talk about at wide receiver is the news of the day. I suspected this would happen. DeSean Jackson went for a second opinion on his thumb, came back, acted like everything was fine, but why should DeSean Jackson push it? He'll be a free agent, et cetera, et cetera. And they should have freed Chris Godwin a long time ago. Chris Godwin's advanced metrics are awesome. His fantasy points per snap, his yards per route run, et cetera, et cetera. When he came out of Penn State, shout out to Penn State, he had the measurables, the only one in the class ahead of Corey Davis, et cetera, of an elite fantasy wide receiver. So I'm biased. I absolutely love Chris Godwin. Tell me that I'm insane. Chris Godwin has been my boy for a long time, going back to the Penn State days. But as I said, I'm probably biased.
No, man, Chris Godwin's awesome. And you look at what he did last year when DeSean Jackson was out. We had a 2-game sample at the end of the season last year where the same setup we have this time around, DeSean Jackson was out, O.J. Howard was out. And one of those games, Jameis only threw the ball 27 times. Well, the Bucs have thrown the ball, I think 33 is their fewest pass attempts this year, and they've basically been 35 or more every game. Another game with Godwin, another game last year with those guys out, they threw it 51 times. But Godwin went for 98 yards in one game and over 100 in the other. He's going to get a ton of usage here. But I think that you might be underselling the Humphrey side of this as well. And you put them together. So I think you can break down the numbers like this. Like, let's say they throw 35 times and you give like a crazy number of targets to the running backs and to Brate and to Mike Evans. You're still looking at like 14 to 18 targets combined for Godwin and Humphreys, and they cost 8,100 combined. So it's like taking an 8,100 receiver on 14 to 18 targets. And I think that, this season started with two things. This season started with Adam Humphries seeing an ADOT of like 3.2. So everyone was like, oh, Adam Humphries, hands off. And then two, everyone loves DeSean Jackson. Everyone loves Chris Godwin. So all year the talk has been, oh, if this offense would just take Adam Humphries out, we could get all these guys on the field together. So people think of Humphries as just this bad player, but he's a key piece in this offense. He and Jameis have a legit connection. These guys stick around after practice if we want to get into narrative stuff to do extra reps together. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that both guys benefit quite a bit here, and I think that playing both of them together is pretty sharp. Obviously, Godwin has the higher upside role. It would be tough to get off of either guy, but Godwin like legitimately should be priced at 6,500, 6,700 as opposed to 3,900. So like both these guys quite a bit.
Sorry, I was muted because I was coughing. I'll say this. If you play Adam Humphries over Chris Godwin, you might as well just have intercourse with 4 condoms on at the same time. I mean, just go have some balls, okay, and play the guy who's going down the field and making big plays. And you know, I got a lot in my mentions today about Adam Humphries. I actually think Adam Humphries is going to be way more popular than I thought he would be originally. Maybe that's just people in my mentions. I don't know. But either way, I agree with you. Both plays are strong. I typically don't do the thing like you where I play both at the same time. But I hear you. It can make sense. Let's talk.
I think Godwin's a better play. But if you're going to get like 15 plus points at 4,200 is 15 plus points at 4,200, even if you're playing him with a guy on his team. This team throws so much. And Mike Evans is, what's he going to get? 18 targets? He's not going to get 18 targets. So there's just a ton of targets to go around. I feel really safe about this passing attacks volume because the Panthers force one of the highest pass play rates in the NFL. Teams don't like running on them. The Bucs obviously don't like running the ball. So I just think there's a lot of volume to go around here. DeSean Jackson's been getting 7-8 targets. So free those up for these guys. And unless Brate just steps out there and gets 8 or 9 targets, which has not happened with DeSean and OJ Howard off the field. I think that both guys are very much in play. Yeah, I'm with you. Godwin's the better play. And Humphries is, as you like to put it, the 4-condom play. The Sam Bradford, what was that? That was Sam Bradford Kelly's offense was the last time we had the having sex with condoms.
Yeah, it was because everybody was afraid that Sam Bradford was going to get hurt. And so it ends up they didn't get hurt. He just played really bad. So either way, it went all bad.
The joke.
Yeah. Oh wow. Wow. Producer Jay just came into our ears and told us that ESPN is reporting that Kareem Hunt will be released by the Chiefs or has been released by the Chiefs.
Yeah, the Redskins can pick him up.
Wow. Swift. All right, let's continue to move on at the wide receiver position. Do you see any merit for anybody below Godwin? Chris Conley will be playing almost every snap with Sammy Watkins. We know this role in the Chiefs offense is hit or miss. He could easily see 1 or 2 targets. He could also see 8 or 9. I think it's pretty wide. Bruce Ellington is going to see a lot of targets, I think, but they're not going to be very high value targets. Do you see anything below Godwin worth looking at?
I think that if you take one of these guys, you have to first say, like, if you're going to fade one of the Bucs receivers, you have to first say, can these guys outscore them, and then move forward. If you think one of these guys can outscore them, there's a few of them who are good plays before the DeSean Jackson news or decent plays. Ellington, 16 targets the last 2 weeks. Only 2 of them have come more than 6 yards downfield, and none have come more than 10 yards downfield. So, like you said, not a lot of upside there. And Robert Foster, I would look at him the way that you looked at Eric Ebron when Doyle was in there, in that that volume is going to be limited. You know that he could get 0 points, but you also know the team's going to give him some upside looks. Foster has, I think it was 5 catches on 7 targets, and 3 of them were thrown 40-plus yards downfield. So they do want to design downfield shots to take advantage of his speed and Josh Allen's arm. Neither of these guys is better plays than Godwin or Humphreys. Obviously, Foster could legitimately go for 0 points, but if you want to get crazy and try some other stuff, those guys are both in the conversation.
Let's move up a little bit. Devin Funchess will be back or is expected back for the Panthers. How do you think that affects DJ Moore? Because it's weird, DJ Moore has played awesome. I think DJ Moore is starting to get more comfortable. They're featuring DJ Moore, but it just happened to be coincidentally, or maybe coincidentally not, as Devin Funchess was hurt and out. How do you think the return of Funchess affects DJ Moore at 5,600?
I think we still get 6 or 7 targets. I think it'd be hard for them to hold him under 5 targets. He was getting that with Funchess playing, and in this offense, it'd be tough for him to get above 8 or 9 or get above 8 targets just because of the nature of this offense, the way they spread it around, the way they slow down the pace, the way that they are so run heavy. So 5 to 8 is a comfortable range for DJ, and I'm looking at 6 to 7 targets. It's interesting just to look at where his points come from, right? Because his average depth of target is 8.1, which is essentially a possession receiver, but he just gets tons of yards after the catch. That is the one thing that the Bucs do well, is tackle after the catch. So, I don't see a ton of room for him to grow, right? He already has an 83% catch rate in these last few games, and that's what the Bucs are bad at, is keeping guys from catching passes. So a bunch of targets, 5 to 15 yards downfield, easier for him to catch it than likely gets tackled afterward. So I think he's a tournament play to just say, what if he breaks one of these for a long play? Likely his ownership's going to be pretty high, right, because of the way he's been playing lately. So for me, that'd be a fade just because you're banking on like a big yak day. But obviously, he's a sick player and not against the play. But yeah, from a game theory perspective, his floor is lower than people are giving it credit for.
In the 6K range, I think we do have some pretty strong options headlined by Kenny Golladay, who sees this massive target floor bump in the wake of Golden Tate being traded, Marvin Jones being out. Michael Roberts isn't going to play in this game for the Lions. Is Kenny Golladay a priority for you? We expect a lot of pass attempts from Matthew Stafford here. Aqib Talib will be back, but I think Aqib Talib will be limited to maybe a dozen snaps for the Rams. So he'll continue to run routes at Sam Shields, Marcus Peters, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have Robert Woods in that same game. We also have Emmanuel Sanders against the Bengals. Does anything stand out to you in the 6K range?
Yeah, Golladay is going to see the targets, like you said. He has a 52% catch rate since Marvin Jones has been out. So, teams just know they can dedicate all their attention to him. And this offense has basically become the Jets. Everything is horizontal except for 1 or 2 targets per game to Golladay. So I think there's risk of him missing this week, but I think that he's still a strong play, not a priority for me. Woods and Cooks I like quite a bit in this spot. I think we're looking at 8 to 10 targets a piece for these guys. And, a lot of talk about, every week there's always a lot of talk about, well, who will Darius Slay cover? But it really hasn't mattered this year. Slay's been below average cornerback, and then everybody else on the Lions has been legit bad. So a lot of upside on both of those guys. And then Emmanuel Sanders, I think he and Sutton are both just tournament plays attached to this poor passing attack, but obviously with a lot of upside against the Bengals this week. So neither of those guys are guys that I'm like going out of my way to roster, but I think that they're in play. But yeah, I like Woods and Cooks and Golladay in that range quite a bit. Won't be surprised if I end up with one of them this week.
Yeah. And the spot for Woods I think stands out a lot. I know he hasn't had the huge game yet with Cooper Kupp out, but like the usage is just like right there for Robert Woods. Let's keep moving up here into the 7K range. The matchup for Odell Beckham, I don't think is ideal, but I also don't think it's as bad as maybe people assume it will be. And Odell Beckham obviously bitched after last game that he wasn't used enough against the Eagles. They didn't attack the Eagles corners enough. Maybe you get a squeaky wheel there. Also, I think the play that stands out to me, at least in the high range, is Adam Thielen, who will mostly be working inside against the Patriots. And that's really the way that you beat the Patriots, is on the inside with tight ends and slot receivers, et cetera, et cetera. Can we always expect volume? And with Steph Diggs on the injury report, maybe Steph Diggs seeing Stephon Gilmore, you can make even more cases that Adam Thielen will get back up to that volume we saw at the beginning of the year when he was seeing 12, 13, 14 targets a game. So talk to me about the high range here. We have Julio, we have Odell, we have Julian Edelman, we have Adam Thielen.
Yeah, Odell, Julio are just tournament plays for me to bet on talent, hope for upside. The Bears have allowed the third lowest yards per pass attempt, but they've allowed the fourth most wide receiver receptions because it's tough to throw to running backs on them, tough to throw to tight ends on them. They're typically playing with a lead, so they do allow receptions at a below average ADOT, at a below average catch rate, at a below average yak per reception rate. So it doesn't set up great for Beckham to hit, but he's going to get the targets. Won't be surprising if he pops off. Thielen, I think efficiency is going to be a little bit of a struggle here. This guy has like a 75% catch rate, right? But Jason McCourty allows, I think it's a 52% catch rate. So obviously the Vikings are going to try to get Thielen on Jonathan Jones, on JC Jackson, which are just, easy matchups to win, but we should see a lot of McCourty on Thielen. So I'm hoping for one of these 14, 15, 16 target games that you just alluded to. I think if he gets one of those, then he's basically locked for 100 yards and obviously has big touchdown upside. If he ends up at like 11 or 12 targets, he could be a little bit concerning at this 8K price tag. But I'd be comfortable betting on Thielen. Thielen's one of my favorite guys. Up here, also pretty comfortable betting on Evans in tournaments as a guy, we talk about it kind of week in and week out, who, look, in 8 of the games where he's had just 6 catches, he's gone for over 100 yards in 6 of those 8 games. So if he gets his targets, if his targets go up just by 1 or 2 with Deshaun Jackson out, I think he might go a little overlooked as everybody's taking these cheaper Tampa receivers. And I think that puts Evans strongly in play in tournaments. And I think Davante Adams is in play as well. You're probably looking at 70 yards, but you're hoping for 1 or 2 touchdowns with his massive red zone role. Thielen's the best play to me up here, but these guys are all in consideration this week.
Yeah, I certainly have concerns. I know that the Cardinals haven't done it much, but it would make total sense to use Patrick Peterson on Davante Adams this week, no?
Yeah, I don't know how much that matters. At the same time, we have Mike McCarthy, who, do you remember that playoff game a few years ago against the Seahawks when he just ran Jordy right at Richard Sherman, like 70% of his routes? So for all we know, Davante's going to be matched up on Patrick Peterson 40% of the time, even if Peterson sticks to his side because Mike McCarthy's the coach. So certainly concerns there, but if we're talking upside, the upside's there.
Sure. Anything else off the board at wide receiver? We didn't mention Corey Davis. We didn't mention Josh Reynolds, who I think is overpriced but has a better role than people realize. I've heard some talk about Marcel Aitman in kind of a garbage time role at 3,600. Curtis Samuel, maybe not with Devin Funchess back, but still think they try to get the ball to Curtis Samuel in a really good matchup 3, 4, 5 times. Anything else off the board at wide receiver?
Yeah, man, I think Tyreek Hill could legitimately outscore everyone on the slate. The only concern is the blowout, right? But Sammy Watkins out. Tyreek Hill's seen over 30% of the targets since Sammy Watkins has been out. The Raiders allow an increase on the league average yak per reception of 27.5%. This defense is so old and so slow that there's just no way for them to stop Tyreek Hill. So the big concern here is paying $9,100 for 7 to 10 targets, but legitimately on 7 to 10 targets, Tyreek Hill could go for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think there's a strong case to be made for paying up at wide receiver with Tyreek Hill. If you like Mahomes, this is where a lot of these points are going to come from, is Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, with Hill carrying the most upside. So Hill has 4 games this year that you basically had to have in order to win tournaments. I think this is a week where it would make a lot of sense for him to post another one of those games. Obviously a scary floor, for his price, but I like Tyreek Hill a lot. I think there's a case to be made for him, in tournaments, even over Gurley and Christian McCaffrey, because we're talking about these guys probably being capped at around 28 to 33, 34 points, and Tyreek Hill could legitimately go for 40 plus in this spot.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill is for sure an awesome play. If he was anything less, credit to DraftKings. If he was like 8K, everybody would have played him. So credit to them for making 9,100. I was just like shocked. I was like, oh my God, 9,100 for Tyreek Hill. My target projection on him is literally 8, and he costs 9,100. So, but obviously a target to Tyreek Hill in this matchup is worth insanely more than any other target. All right. Anything else at wide receiver?
No, I'm good. Let's go to the tight end position where there's so much to talk about.
All right. Well, we do have news at the tight end position. The salaries came out after the Jack Doyle injury, or before the Jack Doyle injury was announced. That left Eric Ebron at 4,200. We have seen Eric Ebron fail a ton as chalk. However, we have not seen him fail as chalk as a member of the Colts. We have not seen him fail as chalk really when Jack Doyle has been out. So I think Eric Ebron will be massively owned, 40%, maybe more. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to find a way that one of these other guys projects better than him. It is a bottom 10 tight end matchup in terms of receptions allowed, yards allowed. But the Jags are so much tougher on running backs, so much tougher on wide receivers that the targets do go to tight ends. So I think we see 7 to 11 targets. I'm looking at 4 to 6 for Greg Olsen. I'm looking at 4 to 6 for Njoku. And I'm looking at 7 to 9 targets for Gronk. I think that Gronk is the guy you can make the best case for playing above Ebron, but I do think that Ebron is the best play as a cheaper guy, more targets. Gronk, I went through the numbers this week of Gronk's numbers this year versus his career as far as catch rate, yards per reception, yards per game. And he does look slower and less dominant, but all of his numbers are not far off. The only reason he's looked so poor is the lack of touchdowns. So wouldn't be crazy for Gronk to go for a 2-touchdown game and Ebron to get none. I think that's the best case to make for moving off of Ebron. But on paper, Ebron's the best play. I don't know. What cases can you make for some of these other guys around him?
Well, I mean, the only case I think you can make, I mean, Andrew Luck is so tight end heavy. I don't have the numbers, but it seems to me that anecdotally, he's just like targeting tight ends in the red zone at a disproportional rate. And it makes sense considering the wide receivers that he has, right? I mean, guys are catching, like Mo Alley Cox is catching touchdowns and et cetera, et cetera. So I think the best case to move off Ebron to me is to fade him for Travis Kelce and hope that, as you mentioned, Eric Ebron does not get a touchdown and Kelce just goes ham. Of course, you're paying $7K for Kelce and 4,200 for Ebron. Do you see merits in making that fade?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're probably underselling Gronk a little bit in this matchup against the Vikings, who are so tough on wide receivers. I mean, this game has an over-under of like 49, and the Patriots are sitting at Vegas implied total around 27. And we didn't mention Edelman, we didn't mention James White, we didn't mention Sonny Michel, we didn't mention Josh Gordon. The best way to attack the Vikings is with tight ends. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Kelce's a better raw play than Gronk for sure. The price makes it a little tough to get up there, but the salary is available. I think that either of these guys you can make a case for moving off of Ebron for, recognizing that Ebron's the best on paper play. I mean, last time the Colts and Jags played, 10 of Luck's 29 passes went to tight ends, and they don't have Doyle now. They don't have Mo Alley Cox this week, so it's Swoop and Ebron's going to see most of those looks. Definitely a safe play, but we hate to play Ebron at chalk just because, as you mentioned, it is still Eric Ebron. We might have been overrating that Lions offense for years with the way they look this year. Same offensive coordinator they've had the last few years. So, maybe just took Frank Reich to free Eric Ebron.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some other off-the-board plays at tight end. I think that people, at the beginning of the week at least, had interest in Matt Lacoste with Jeff Hireman out and the matchup against the Bengals. Lacoste is stone minimum. I think you can also throw Kyle Rudolph into the mix as a touchdown-dependent option at 3,600. As always, guys like Austin Hooper, you mentioned David Njoku, who I think has a reasonable matchup against the Texans. If you think that there will be a ton of garbage time for the Raiders, Jared Cook has been shown an ability to play well in garbage time. Anything else off the board at tight end?
How much are the Raiders trying to lose, right? They're playing Jared Cook on like half of the snaps.
I know. They're really trying to lose hard.
Yeah, I actually like Lacoste. What would concern me is typically these targets to tight ends on the Denver offense have come basically at the line of scrimmage. So even if you pile up 5 catches, it might go for 15 yards. But at stone minimum, as you said, I'm expecting 5 to 6 targets for Lacoste in this matchup. And if we didn't have Ebron, he would certainly be like a very appealing way to just save salary. If we didn't have all this other news, it's freed up salary this week. So I think that he's in play. And yeah, the best way to attack the Texans is with tight ends. So wouldn't be crazy to see Njoku catch 5, 6, 7 balls. So if, let's say, Ebron gets 7 targets, 5 catches, and no touchdowns, Njoku could easily pass him this week. And yeah, Greg Olsen smashed Tampa last time around. They're bottom 8 in catches, yards, and touchdowns allowed to tight ends. So we can't project a ton of targets for Olsen, but just a good matchup for him. He should be able to do well in this spot. I think all those guys are viable over Ebron in tournaments, with Ebron just kind of line up as the best play on paper.
Anything else at tight end? Chris Herndon, Cam Brate, anything like that?
No, I mean, you could see Brate pop off, but it just hasn't happened with Jameis in these games with OJ Howard missing time. It's still stuck at 4 or 5 targets. So tough for him to get like the 60, 70 yards and a touchdown that you would really need.
Let's move to defense, where I think we have a lot of really good options below 3K this week. I think the one that's going to be the most popular will be the Packers at home against the Cardinals offense, which is just, I mean, just a stone disaster, this Cardinals offense. And people thought Byron Leftwich was going to save them. He clearly wasn't. Is the Packers the one that stuck out to you below 3K, or do you see something else?
Yeah, the Packers stand out the most, but a pricing psychology thing, we need to think about that Chicago's just 500 more.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the salary of Chicago against the Giants team that's taken the 2nd most sacks in the NFL. Bears had the most takeaways, 6th most sacks. And then, yeah, Packers, this attacking defense against just a shell-shocked Josh Rosen. My only concern there is that last week in a blowout, they only let Rosen throw, 19 times on 47 plays. So we could see them just, they could just be killing off the season by running the ball, protecting Rosen's psyche. But yeah, I mean, the Packers, if Rosen drops back even 25 times, the Packers should be able to smash. And then probably a little bit off the board, I like Miami, who's forced the 3rd most turnovers in the NFL, and will be taking on Josh Allen, playing on the road. I think that's a strong play as well.
What about the Kansas City Chiefs? We know about their struggles in terms of giving up yards and points. However, they have shown an ability to make plays, might get Eric Berry back, et cetera, et cetera. They're facing the Raiders. How do you feel about the Chiefs down at 2,500?
Yeah, the Chiefs are a strong play. Houston's a strong play. Like these teams that can get after the quarterback, try to force mistakes, and are playing, less so Houston, but playing mistake-prone quarterbacks. Definitely like the Chiefs call this week. And, I think we see these teams get priced down when they're on the road, which obviously makes a difference. But on something like Bears versus Giants or Chiefs versus Raiders, still a ton to like in those spots for sure.
The Rams are facing the Lions. I think that's at least interesting. The Browns have a very aggressive defense. We talk about that every week. I know the Browns defense is extremely cheap on FanDuel. Deshaun Watson, I think, has become less mistake prone as he's ratcheted down the attempts a lot, but they are very cheap. I think you can make a case to go all the way up to Seattle. I think you can make a case for the Colts. I think there's a lot to like at defense this week. I think it'll be relatively spread out, other than probably Green Bay. Yeah, maybe people will be on Chicago too. I don't know. Anything else off the board?
No, I like all those defenses you mentioned. Makes sense in tournaments to diversify and just get off of the popular defenses. So a lot of these teams could force mistakes. Before pricing opened up, my builds at the start of the week messed around with the Browns, so I like that one. Baltimore is another one. Just if you want to say, take a really good defense and hope that they make some plays at low ownership. I think there's a lot of different ways to go at defense this week. It makes sense to go off the board a little bit as well.
All right, now it is time for the portion of the program everybody has been waiting for with bated breath. It is, of course, the stacks. Nobody's watched the entire show. They fast forward to this. By the way, there's a bunch of sick tournaments on Gen. I never want to play tournaments, but this $10 on DraftKings is awesome. There's a $100 Millie Maker, which has the screwed up payout structure with $1 million to first and like $150K to second, but $100 at least makes it more conceivable that you could actually get to the top. Still, obviously, very unlikely. But yeah, I think there's some cool stuff here for tournaments. So let's give the people some tournament plays this week. We'll give you one chalk and one contrarian stack. You can go first.
I'll start contrarian, and this is one that will probably be contrarian just because there's so many other things to like, and people's minds won't go here. And that would be Jared Goff to Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks. You could bring it back with Kenny Galladay. On the other side, as much upside on this stack as any of these other popular ones. Obviously, blowout concerns, but I think we could get really low ownership on Goff to Woods and Cooks, and a lot of upside there.
I'm going to start with a chalk stack, and that is, of course, Jameis Winston to my boy, Penn State's own Chris Godwin. Athletic freak, has produced at every opportunity he's had. And now he gets a really good matchup. I think he'll see a lot of Dante Jackson, who has been banged up. And I think Dante Jackson is very, very burnable by Chris Godwin down at 3,900. So that'll be my chalk stack, Jameis to Chris Godwin.
I'm going to stick in that same game and go Cam and McCaffrey on the same roster. Obviously, we know that McCaffrey can score through the air, so you hope that they pair up on one or two of those. But also, this team could legitimately score 5 or 6 touchdowns. They put up 42 points in this matchup last time. So if they get 5 or 6 touchdowns, you basically get every one of those touchdowns by getting Cam and McCaffrey. There aren't going to be any that score that don't have those two involved. Potentially get 2 or 3 out of McCaffrey and 4 or 5 out of Cam by pairing those two together.
That's all good until Curtis Samuel scores on a reverse.
That is true.
All right. For my contrarian stack, I say it every week. I have to include Julio in my stack every week on here. Matt Ryan to Julio Jones. As I mentioned at the top, people aren't going to play them because of the matchup, and albeit it is a very tough matchup, this is still a home game where Ryan and Julio have been significantly better throughout their careers, and this is still today's NFL where it's just so hard to defend truly elite talent in the pass game. That's certainly what Matt Ryan and Julio Jones are. They also come in at nice price discounts. So that'll be my contrarian. All right. The cat is here. Any 1 week season news? We forgot to do 1 week season news off the top. What do you have to say to the people out there who are feeding your capitalistic, your mongering of capitalism?
To the people who are not feeding it, because we're free this week, thanks for hanging out. And we won't tell you what Adam says about you before and after the show. Appreciate you watching the video. And yeah, hopefully I did all right. I kind of feel like Michael Jordan in the finals with his flu because I'm not feeling too well today. But I got my fleece flannel on, so I'm trying to warm up and sweat out whatever I'm dealing with, and get better for the weekend.
If you are watching this for free and you're not a subscriber, it's ridiculous that you're not paying JM the 40 or 50 or whatever he wants for his 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 words per week. It's unacceptable. For the price of one mid-priced lunch,
one Applebee's lunch.
You could have all.
Hey, Philly, do you got to get it delivered from the suburbs?
Dude, come on. We don't need an Applebee's. Come on.
They drive Uber Eats drives from the suburbs to.
We do Chili's here, man. Chili's is way better than Applebee's. All right, it's enough. Good luck to everybody this weekend. For JM, for producer Jay, for Jerry, for JM's cat. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.